In an ideal world, with the number 2 pick, the Warriors get a player that can help the core 4 right now chase another championship in the next 2 to 3 year window, but at the same time has the potential, the ceiling to become the next franchise player of the Warriors. But we all know 2020 ain't nothing ideal, right? So what do the Warriors do? Do they go and trade the future for the right now to reward what this core has done? Or do they look more towards the future and look for a younger player who may not help these guys right now, but has a higher ceiling and a future that could lead the organization forward? I thought I would propose a few trades here and give you my thoughts. Now, whenever a superstar exits the playoffs in less than ideal fashion and seems disgruntled, the rumors begin. So let the rumors begin. Joel Embiid is one of the obvious talking points here. Now, let's start with the advantages. He's a top 5 talent. Like, he's a top 5 talent in my eyes, and he's 24 years old, 25 years old. He gives you immediate rim protection. I know a lot of people feel like the big man is dead. The centers don't hold value, and to an extent, that's true if you're watching what's going on in the league. But if you're also watching what's going on in this bubble, I think rim protection still is much needed. You look at these big guards, these point forwards. If you can't stop these guys from doing what they want at the rim, it almost even opens up the threes even more with an inside-out game, and it's no longer a pick your poison. It's a do whatever you want. So rim protection, I still feel, is at a premium in this league. I think another advantage would be you can run the offense through Joel. When you look at this Warriors roster now, outside of Steph, who do you really run the offense through? Draymond is a guy that's going to push the ball, right, and make decisions out of the short roll. He doesn't have that type of gravity. You can't run it through him. Wiggins, it looks like he's going to be a weak side scorer, and we know Klay's not a guy you run the offense through. So Joel would give them that second guy. He's not a ball handler per se, but he's a guy where you could take Steph off the floor and run the offense through him, or run the offense through him with Steph off ball, because we know Kerr loves to do that anyway. Another advantage that I would mention, not necessarily on the court, but you would be naive to think that the shoe wars don't matter. Joel Embiid is Team Under Armour. So he and Steph, I think that's where that initial connection happened, right? They probably met through Under Armour or spent some time together. And that leads me also into just a connection. I think a chemistry. It seems that Joel likes Draymond. They get along. As far as chemistry goes, in the locker room, we kind of can figure that Joel would be a fit. I think the idea would be he's no longer has the pressure of being the team leader at 25 years old, because we're going to get into this now. Let's look at the disadvantages as far as acquiring him goes. He's injury prone. It's a very high risk. You look 3-4 years from now, where is he going to be? Is he even going to be in the league? I think that's a fair question. I'm serious, because of his maturity issues to go along with being injury prone. And then the fact that he wants to play slow. It doesn't necessarily fit stylistically the way the Warriors have played under Steve Kerr. They want to space and pace, play fast, right? Joel wants to slow down, ISO, and play in the half court. So it's a contrasting style. I know there are people that have thrown Klay Thompson out there. Sorry, no, not going to happen. I know he's 30 and coming off an ACL. That's not happening. Like, the only way Klay gets involved in a conversation is if someone's name is Giannis Antetokounmpo. My conclusion on this deal is I don't do it. I think it's just too risky. I led this video by saying in an ideal world, in an ideal world, Joel Embiid's a top 5 talent. He stays healthy, he gets in shape, and he matures under the championship DNA and environment that the Warriors provide. But if you were to ask me, look, who's going to have the better career overall long-term, Joel Embiid or Andrew Wiggins? I think it's legit 50-50. And that's simply because of all the risk factors involved with Joel. Andrew Wiggins, he may not get you excited for his love and passion of ball and his juice. You know, Wiggins may lack the juice, right? But long term, he's a much safer play. And for that very reason, I pass on this deal. Now let's move over to his counterpart, Ben Simmons. Maybe they move off Ben, right? And the cost would essentially be the same thing. Wiggins, the number 2 pick and pull. It's the same thing. You could, I guess, make the argument you send him Draymond because now Ben and Dre are not together, right? But again, for much of the same reasons I discussed with Joel Embiid, I don't think they break up the core three. I think their cachet and their unity is worth more than either one of these two's potential ceilings. But let's talk about the selling points and pros of perhaps acquiring Ben Simmons. Off top, he's a top 3 defender, man. He's a top 3 defender. Look, all we've heard the last year is, how do they replace Andre Iguodala and Sean Livingston? Well, Ben Simmons is kind of like a super Andre Iguodala. He's a huge, versatile defender, and he's pretty much a perfect fit with the Splash Brothers. He doesn't want to shoot, and he wants to play fast, defend, rebound, and run the floor. Kind of like Andre. And don't get it twisted. I know there's nuances and differences to their games, but, with a broad brush, he's a super Andre Iguodala, and so it fits the Warriors' style. Now, the obvious problem is shooting, but the blueprint is he needs a roster similar to Giannis. Everybody's infatuated with getting Giannis. We don't know how much of a pipe dream that is, right? But the reality of it is Ben Simmons is the closest thing to Giannis. Almost 7 foot, the way he moves up and down the floor and can push the ball to the front of the rim, he's not Giannis. We all know he's a tier below that. But the shooting is the obvious issue, and I'm here to say it's never going to happen. It's too late for that. Anybody holding their breath for him, pulling up and taking jump shots, it's not going to happen. But a lot of that, again, can be covered up playing with the right roster, in particular the Splash Brothers. Now, another question I think is personality. I talked about how Joel, we kind of already understand he has a relationship with a lot of these Warrior players. Ben Simmons is kind of fickle, maybe a little abrasive. He's much harder to read. I'm not saying it's an issue. I'm just saying, could it be? It's a question. And then, again, like Embiid, I don't think it's as big of a concern. Durability now. Remember, it was the back, and now it's the knee. And I used it different because injury prone and durability, I kind of use two different phrases. Joel's injury prone, right? It's always something. It's always something. Like every week there's something on the injury report with Joel. With Ben, it seems like it's just been injuries here and there, and it's almost just because of how big and athletic he is. It's a little bit different, but ultimately it's really the same problem, right? You know the saying, the best ability is availability. Now, personally, I would be more interested in Ben Simmons than Embiid for this Warriors roster, but I still don't know if I pull the trigger. Again, I'm higher on Andrew Wiggins than I think a lot of people are. He's only 24 years old. And then the number 2 pick, I think if the Warriors were making a trade for either of these two with Wiggins in the number 2, they must really not like the talent in this top 5. I think it would almost say more about the talent in this draft than it did about these players and Wiggins. Ultimately, I don't pull the trigger on either of these deals. All right, so those were the obvious trades I think that everybody's been buzzing about. Let me dig into some maybe more realistic scenarios and some things that people haven't thought about. Lonzo Ball in a pick swap using the trade exception. And that's going to be the theme of a lot of these trades, swapping picks and using the trade exception. Now, Lonzo Ball falls under the trade exception. I think he's at 13 or so mil a year. Sell me on it out. Now, a lot of people are sour on this. Well, I don't know about this, right? Well, look, he's a versatile defender. He's a big, versatile, defensive-minded guard, and he doesn't want the ball. And I say that in a good way. So many of today's guards are relying on having the ball. They're more ball dominant, and in order to be effective, they need to massage the ball and have it more. Lonzo, he plays damn near hot potato with it. But the good thing about that is he is, without question, an elite passer. So he can guard 3 positions. He moves the ball. He wants to play fast. It seems like a perfect system fit. You know what? The more I think about it, Lonzo, he's kind of like Kroger Ben Simmons, right? He's Android Ben Simmons. It's a lot of the same strengths and a lot of the same weaknesses, only in a shrunken down, less talented version. Sorry, LeVar, but it is what it is. Anyway, the shooting we know is an issue. Now, it's much less of an issue, I think, than Ben's. Ben's, it's never going to happen. Lonzo's actually made a lot of strides. And as a weak side shooter, he's willing to pull the trigger. And if he can be at, what's the standard, 33%, it may not be that big of a problem. We know he's never going to be a pull-up shooter. He's never going to shoot it well off the dribble. He's injury prone. Whether it's an ankle, a foot, a knee, He seems to get chipped up. And now I've put personality here as well. And I don't necessarily think it would be a chemistry issue. I think that Lonzo's a quiet kid. But I do think people have questioned his commitment and want to win. There was rumors that he was checked out in Orlando in the bubble before they even played. Maybe he took one look at Zion's backside and he knew they didn't have a chance. Either way, there's some questions about his demeanor and how hard he's willing to work and his winning mentality. Now, that's not all the trade. I'm giving you the pluses and the minuses on Lonzo. You trade back to number 13, and who is there? Who is there? Well, it's hard to say as far as the top 10 talent goes and who may slip out of that. But at 13, I'd be willing to guess Siddique Bay would be there, the Villanova product. And the Warriors have been rumored to like him a lot. And I've even heard that they have him like as high as 5 on their board. Who knows? There's a lot of smoke screens right now. But that would be the other piece of this. If the Warriors' actual big board and targets weren't necessarily in most people's top 5s, that would be the reason for doing this. They get one of their targets at a much cheaper price, as well as acquiring the third guard they need to push forward right now. So it would be a win-win situation. Lonzo helps the Warriors right now, and then you get a guy for the future. But Bay, to be honest with you, is a guy I think could help right now. He's mature. He's a little older. I see him as a stretch 4. I have a full prospect breakdown of him on my Patreon. I'll give you a little spoiler alert. I compared him to the Morris twins. He's the third Morris twin. That's the type of skill set I see in Siddique Bay. Moving on to other trade back possibilities, let's holler at our NorCal armpit, the Kings. Bogdan Bogdanovic. Look, Bogdanovic is a nice player. I like Bogdanovic. And once again, you're seeing, the cost is pretty much the same. It's a swap for the TPE. Now, Bogdanovic needs to sign a contract, and his contract is up in the air. And so it would essentially be a sign and trade using the trade exception and swapping picks. Capologists, you can hit me if I'm wrong. If it's not feasible and it's not possible, it's not possible. I think it is. I really like Bogdanovic. I think he's one of the more underrated players in this league. He's kind of hidden up in Sacramento and was buried behind Buddy up until, a couple months ago. And look, he screams Warriors basketball. He really does. Shooting, versatility, toughness. He's pretty much everything the Warriors like in their guards and wings, except that he's not a plus defender. He's not. So the disadvantages are his defense. He's not a plus defender. I don't think he's a liability completely because he's competitive and he's tough, but you don't want him on the other team's score. Put it to you like that. Now, another disadvantage possibly of this move would be the cost. The Kings had offered him 4 years, $51 million, and he turned it down. Now he's been inserted into their starting lineup. You guys know the story, right? Buddy Hield to the bench after they paid Buddy Hield. So that's the problem that the Kings have right now. But I believe if it was a sign and trade and it was something like 4 for 68, that would make it 17 mil per, and it would fall under the trade exception. Now the problem is the tax. It would cost the Warriors even more. And so is the juice worth the squeeze when we're paying him big bucks considering the luxury tax? But that's something that needs to be considered. And then again, you get the 12th pick with the Kings. Bay could be on the board. Naismith, Vassell, I doubt he lasts that long, but you're getting another player as well. All right, here's my spicy one. The number 2 pick and Kevon Looney for Michael Porter Jr. First off, let me address from Denver's side. Nugget fans and most fans are like, well, they ain't giving him Michael Porter Jr. Like the way he's looking in this bubble, the way he's stroking the ball, they ain't giving him up, right? But if you had watched the video, I released the Red Pill Denver video the other day talking about Jokic. If Jokic is their guy, which he is their guy, can you pair him with Michael Porter Jr. because neither one of them defend? And so if the Nuggets moved up all the way to the 2nd pick, you'd assume James Wiseman would be on the board, and James Wiseman looks like a player that you'd want to pair with Jokic, a big athletic rim protector who could get out and probably guard in space a bit and would be able to protect and hide Jokic's deficiencies. So that's why Denver would do it. They would have to really like James Wiseman. In the matter of days here, they're going to get knocked out by Utah. Donovan will probably hang 80, and they're going to have to reevaluate their course. I know they've had some injuries, but ultimately they need rim protection and a defensive-minded player, an athletic defensive-minded player next to Jokic. Now, for the Warriors, this is a little hyperbolic here, but you're getting the closest thing to Kevin Durant probably in the league in a young player. That size and that confidence, you can't teach it. The shooting is pure. Now, I just got done talking about him as a defender and his defensive liabilities. If he sniffs the air of Kevin Durant, it's a win, right? But I do think he's a 20-point scorer. I think he has size, and I think he's a pure shooter. So you can play him along a Draymond Green. You can play him along another center who doesn't want to shoot the ball and still have that size. That's the advantages of him. But there are other questions. I personally wasn't sure we were going to ever see him. The reason why they got him on the outskirts of the lottery a few years ago, played like a game or two and then was out and had back surgery. And the more I read about the surgery, and then I heard one of his legs is, longer than the other, that Greg Oden problem. So I was very wary we'd ever see him. So far, so good, but that has to be brought up. His injury history with his back and stuff like that. And then again, you're seeing personality as an issue. MAGA Porter, not sure he meshes with the locker room. You can't have it both ways. Like I talked about, it's confidence, it's borderline arrogant, and that's what makes him such a good scorer. But at the same time, I think that he is not going to fit personality-wise with as many different players in locker rooms as perhaps a Wiggins, who you wish he was more confident, right? It's a funny thing like that. So I don't know, just throwing that out there. Don't lose your shit. I don't mean to trigger anybody, just bringing up some things that maybe haven't been thought of. My final trade is Andrew Wiggins, the number 2 pick, for Miles Turner and TJ Warren. Clearly, Indiana is in a bit of disarray. They extend Nate McMillan, and then they fire him a week later. They've been swept out of the playoffs. I understand that they weren't expecting that, even though they have a banged-up roster. I think in hindsight, if Miami makes it to the conference finals, maybe the sweep won't look so bad. But the point is, I think Indiana is realizing they need to make some changes. And we know they're not in love with Miles Turner. TJ Warren, obviously, with a crazy bubble performance. I think much like some of these other trades, it really depends how much they like some of this top talent in the draft. If they really like Wiseman, Edwards, or Ball, right, that number 2 pick holds a lot of weight. And then Wiggins is a wing who kind of unclogs that front court jam with Sabonis and Turner. For the Warriors, look, they're getting proven commodities. We talked about like the balancing act of playing for right now and also having a future. These guys are play right now guys. Now, Miles is still young, right? And he is the biggest prize in this in my eyes. He's the elusive 3-and-D big and really an ideal pairing next to Draymond Green. TJ Warren, he's a proven scorer. But the disadvantages are, I think you're selling some of the future for the present. That number 2 pick in Wiggins moving forward, I think has more potential. And then consistency. I think both these guys, and part of the frustration with Indiana a little bit, especially with Miles Turner, has been consistency. Sometimes he no-shows. Toughness. Are they tough? And that's more of a shot at Miles Turner than TJ Warren. But let me know what y'all think. I played with the trade machine. This is what I came up with. I'm sure probably a lot of you hate it and think I'm out of my mind. Some of you may be intrigued. Let me know in the comments. And as always, like, share, and subscribe. I'm out, y'all. I've been winning so long, it's like alchemy.